Welcome to Mission Ready Society. I'm your host, Orrin Price, and in today's video, we're talking about land navigation. This is part one of a two-part series that I will be creating as a in-depth land navigation guide. In this part one, we're going to be talking everything to do with the actual map itself and, plotting points and all of that fun stuff. Apologies if my voice sounds a little funny. I'm currently in the process of getting over a little bit of a cold, so bear with me. But the reason I decided to split this up into two parts is because I want to go in depth as much as possible, and I want to hit all the points that are important. So I want to make sure that this is good quality. So I have decided to split it up into two parts, one being the map, which we will cover today, and all that fun stuff, and then the second part will be the actual outdoor portion and everything that goes into doing that. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and let's get into it. Alright, I have switched over to the first person view here, that way you guys can get a good angle of what I'm looking at here. I want to apologize for the fan noise in the background. It's a little warm out right now, so got a fan going. But so here is our map that we're going to be using for part one of this video series guide. And I want to first start by talking about what kind of everything on this map is. So I would like to mention that this map isn't necessarily the best map. There's other ones out there that are a lot more detailed than this. And when I say detailed, I'm mainly talking about this area down here at the bottom, and we usually call this the legend or the legion. And down here is essentially just like a bunch of information that you're going to need for when you're doing land navigation. So some important things to look at down here. First is going to be these arrows here, and I'm going to circle them here. This is probably the most important piece of information you will find down here, and I'll bring this a little closer to the camera. This is called your GM angle, and the reason this is so important is because the north on your map is different than what north is on your compass. So this angle down here is essentially what we use to calculate or to determine what we actually need to shoot with our compass in order to get to the location that we're trying to go. So normally it will actually tell you down here what you need to do to convert from a grid azimuth to a magnetic azimuth. And as you can see here, it says GN, which means grid north, and it's got a little star at the end. And then this arrow here is MN, which is magnetic north, and it's just got like kind of a half arrow. So this is telling us here that we need to subtract 13.2 degrees from whatever azimuth we end up getting. And we're going to go into azimuths in a little bit more depth later on in this video. But yeah, that is a very important piece of information that you're going to want to know and have on your map. Without that, you're going to get an azimuth from your map, and you're going to shoot that azimuth, and it can put you off by several hundred meters. So very important to pay attention to that and make sure you're doing the proper thing. Now, sometimes it'll actually write it out for you and it'll say, like, to convert from a grid north to magnetic north, you need to subtract or you need to add. And it'll usually tell you vice versa as well, what you need to do to convert from a magnetic north to a grid north, which is just the opposite. And when I say the opposite, I'm saying you take whatever azimuth or degrees you have on your compass, and instead of subtracting 13.2, you're going to add 13.2, which will get you your grid north. Alright, so next piece that I want to talk about is these little lines down here, these dashed lines. And now what these dashed lines are how we can determine distance. So as you can see, we have this line down here, which is in miles, and we have this line up top here, which is in kilometers. Usually we're going to be using the kilometers line. So you can see that we have white, black, and then we have a bunch of smaller white and black dashed rectangles or boxes. And now essentially you can see we have 1, 2, 3, and that's telling us that this here is 1 kilometer, this here is 2 kilometers, and this is 3 kilometers. So when we're measuring distance between 2 points or 2 areas that we want to go to, we essentially, usually what you'll do, and what I'll show later on, is you take a separate piece of paper, you lay it down, you mark where one point is, and then you mark where the next point is. And now you take that piece of paper, you bring it down here to this line, and you line it up, and you can see, okay, this is 1 kilometer. And now the reason that these are smaller here on the left side is because if you have, you know, a distance, and let's say it ends here, well, it's kind of hard to guess exactly how far that is per se, because there's no numbers here. So what these do is you then take this piece of paper and you shift it to the left, so then this tick mark lines up with the 1, and then you can determine how many extra, you know, boxes here it is. So let's say you move it over and it's like 3, so you know that your distance is going to be 1.3 kilometers or 1,300 meters. Now that's kind of how you determine distance, and it's the same thing for miles, but I've never used miles, and it's a lot easier to just use kilometers and meters. So that's, you know, your distance box, and again I'll show you that again later. But now some more information is, you can see here's your scale. So this is telling you what the scale of the map is. So this is 1 in 25,000, which is pretty common, and you also have 1 in 50,000, which is also fairly common. That's, you know, essentially just determining the grid squares and how large of an area the map is actually showing. The most important part with understanding the scale is when you have your protractor matching up the correct triangle on your protractor to the grid squares itself, which is pretty straightforward, because if you are using a smaller triangle than the grid square, it should be fairly easy to tell that you're not using the right one. So that's kind of that with the scale. And the reason that I said earlier that this map actually isn't all too good is because there's not a whole lot of details down here. So usually the map legend or legion will tell you, you know, what each thing on the map actually is. So it'll tell you like what these red dash lines are and what the blue is, and you know what these are. Well, these are obviously contour lines, and you know it'll describe, you know, it'll tell you what this tent symbol is, and it'll tell you what this symbol is, and what that symbol is, and what that symbol is, and it'll tell you all of that important information, which this map does not have. So so that's a piece of information that this is missing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an image of what a good map kind of looks like, and you can see all the information that is at the bottom there. And it'll tell you everything. It'll have all of this. It'll tell you the location of the map. It'll have all the information, what everything on the map is. so you can cross-reference it, and you give you your scale. It'll even give you like if it's a section of a larger map, it'll tell you that. Excuse me, sorry. So yeah, so essentially that is, you know, the area where you'll be able to find all of the information that you're going to need to determine kind of what you're looking at here, and you know, to determine other important information when you're actually out there trying to find your point or your location. Alright, so now I want to look at the actual map itself, and right off the bat I want to point out our grid lines here. So our vertical lines are what we call our northings, and our horizontal lines are what we call our eastings. So we have our northings and we have our eastings, and each one of these is numbered, and each one of these numbers corresponds to a different grid line. And what we use these grid lines for is essentially when we're plotting points in different locations. But now to move on, we're now going to talk about terrain features, and we have 5 major terrain features, we have 3 supplemental terrain features, and we have 2 supplementary terrain features. So our 5 major terrain features, and an easy way to remember the 5 major terrain features is by the acronym Hidden Valley Salad Ranch Dressing. And that is because our first one is a hill, our next one is a valley, our next one is a ridge, our next is a saddle, and the next is a depression. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this map, and I'm going to try and point out as many of those as I can, and if there's not one on the map here, then I will insert an image of what that looks like. So to start off, we have a hill, and now hills are pretty straightforward, they're pretty easy. They're usually just, you know, multiple circles that come to a small circle at the top. So as you can see, we have one here, one here, one here, there's another one there, here. They're kind of all over the place on this map, at least. And you know, just so you can get a closer look here, this is what it looks like. Circle, circle, smaller circle. So that's what a hill looks like on a map. Next is a valley. And now a valley is usually the kind of the space in between 2 hills or 2 mountains. So as you can see, we have a mountain here, we have a mountain here, and then we have this space in between the 2. And this is what a valley looks like. And oftentimes, like you can see in the map here, there's usually water that runs down through there, and that's because it's a low point and it's the easiest path for the water to travel. So that's something that's, you know, kind of important to keep in mind when you're actually out there trying to find your point or your location, is keeping in mind that those areas might be wet. So our next one, our third major terrain feature, is a ridge. And our ridge is essentially multiple mountains or multiple hills kind of in a line. And this is kind of the reason people usually call it a ridge line, is because, you know, it's a line, you know, it's pretty straightforward. So kind of right here we have one, so we have a mountain here, a mountain here, and a mountain here, and these 3 form a ridge. So that's, you know, that's what a ridge will look like on your map, and it's nothing more complicated than that, really. But our next major terrain feature, our 4th major terrain feature, is a saddle. And now a saddle is essentially the space that is in between 2 mountaintops, and usually it's not like a ton of space, so it's not like a lot of change in elevation. So a saddle isn't necessarily like the space in between here. This is kind of a saddle here on these two mountaintops. As you can see, kind of this space here, but again, that's kind of, it's a lot of elevation difference in between the two. So what I'll end up doing is I'll put an image of what a saddle, what a good saddle looks like on a map. But the reason it's called a saddle is because essentially, if you're looking at it, it forms kind of like a U shape, like a saddle, and that's where it gets its name from. And then our last major terrain feature, our fifth major terrain feature, last but not least, is a depression. And now there is no depressions on this map, so I will provide an image of what a depression looks like. But essentially, a depression is going to look like a mountaintop, but it's going to have little tick marks facing inwards to show that it's going down instead of up. So like we have our contour lines here, that is indicating, a change in elevation going up. Then we have a depression, which is, it's contour lines, but has those little tick marks, which is what tells us that it's going downwards. So things like a canyon or a quarry or something along those lines is going to be noted as a depression, or drawn as a depression. And now, now that I'm thinking about it, I completely forgot to go over contour lines. But I'm sure many of you know, but contour lines are all of these little squiggly lines here, and that is, what tells us our change in elevation. So the further they are apart, the less steep it is, and the closer they are together, the steeper the elevation change is. So yeah, so now we're going to move on to our 3 minor terrain features and our 2 supplemental terrain features. Alright, so we have our 3 supplemental terrain features to start. So those 3 terrain features are going to be a cut, it is going to be a, it is a draw, a spur, and a cliff. Apologies. A draw, a spur, and a cliff. Okay, we got that. All right. So to start off with number 1, a draw is going to kind of look like a valley, but it's going to be going, up a mountain. And the way that I like to remember a draw is essentially, I think about the contour lines, and I think about the contour lines being like drawn or dragged up the mountain. So it kind of creates, you can see here, it creates these like V shapes, and the end of the V is pointing up the mountain. So that's kind of how I remember a draw, and that's what a draw looks like on your map. But now we have a spur. Okay, gotta regain focus here. But now we have a spur, and a spur is essentially the opposite of a draw. So we have those V's that are facing up the mountain. A spur is V's that are kind of facing down. So you can see that there's one right here. There's a spur, and you can see there's a draw there. And usually spurs and draws are right next to each other, and that's because on a mountain or on a hill, you have sections of it that are coming down that are kind of protruding out. So a spur is protruding out of the mountain and is a higher kind of elevation spot than a draw is. So a draw in a way is kind of like a mini valley on the mountain itself, and spurs are those higher kind of elevation spots. So as you can think, if you think about it, it's kind of like this wavy look, and the top of the wave is the spur and the lower part of the wave is the draw. And then next, in our last supplemental terrain feature, is a cliff. And a cliff is pretty easy to pick out on a map, and that's because a cliff is shown by extremely close contour lines. So as you can see here, we have pretty much a cliff here, or this might not be exactly a cliff, but this is about as close as I see on this map. Again, I'll put an image in of a cliff, but as you can see, all the contour lines get extremely close together and they kind of mash and form into one, and that is what is telling us that there's a cliff there, because it means that the elevation is essentially straight up and down, which is what a cliff is. So that is our 3 supplemental terrain features, and now we just have 2 more, which are a cut and a fill. And now I don't see, or I didn't find any cuts or fills on this map, so I'll put images in, but what I'm going to note is that cuts and fills, the reason they are supplemental terrain features is because they are man-made terrain features. Cuts and fills are not made or produced by nature itself. They are man-made. So the way to kind of think about it is a cut is something, for example, like train tracks that are going through the side of a mountain. So what has happened is essentially, humans have cut out a section of that mountain to make a road or make some sort of path or railroad system through the mountains. So a cut is what shows us that there's that kind of space there that has been carved away. And now a fill is kind of the opposite, and we'll usually see it around like bridges, but essentially it's an area like if you think a bridge and the road has been like built up, and then like off of both sides it's lower kind of elevation. The fill is that area that has been built up for that road to be even or flush with the bridge. So that's kind of what a cut and a fill looks like, and again I'm gonna put an image in of what both of those look like. But that concludes our terrain features. So again, we have 5 major terrain features, we have 3 supplemental terrain features, we have 3 minor terrain features and 2 supplemental terrain features. Our 5 major are a hill, a valley, a ridge, a saddle, and a cliff. And a depression. And then we have our 3 minor, which are a draw, a spur, and a cliff. And then we have our 2 supplemental, which are a cut and a fill. I apologize that I mixed up a ton there, but yes, that is all correct in what I just said. And I have actually written it down on the back here. That way you can all take a picture if you would like, or try and memorize them yourself. And don't mind the bad handwriting. But yes, so as you can see, we have a hill, a valley, a ridge, a saddle, depression for a major, and then we have a draw, a spur, a cliff for a minor, and then we have a cut and a fill for a supplemental. So those are the 10 terrain features that we'll be covering. So one thing that I did forget to mention though is that these contour lines, you can see that some of them are slightly darker, and that is essentially because it's showing us intervals of in elevation gain. So you can see like those darker contour lines are actually numbered. So like this is 3,400, this is 3,600. And what that is telling us is that from this darker contour line to this dark contour line is a gain of 200 feet of elevation. So that is also helpful information to know. But yeah, so that is our terrain features, and that is what the grid lines are and the contour lines. So now we're gonna move into the fun stuff, and I'm gonna show you how to plot points and get your distance and your azimuth and all of that fun stuff. Alright, so now we're gonna talk about plotting points and getting distances and all of that kind of fun stuff, you know, that is important for land navigation. So first we're going to start with plotting our points though. So this is a protractor. You can pick one of these up on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. I have several. This one's kind of a little beat up. But yeah, so you're going to need one of these, a protractor. And as you can see, these are the triangles that I was talking about earlier. So this is the largest one, and then you have a smaller one, and then an even smaller. And you can see that this protractor has the scales on it as well, which correlates to the scale that we had talked about on your map. So you can see that this largest triangle here is 1 in 25,000. The smaller one is 1 in 50,000, and this smallest one is 1 in 100,000. So for this map, we're going to be using the largest triangle, which is our 1 in 25,000. Now another thing to note is that each one of these tick marks is going to correlate to essentially 100 meters, and then the 10, or the last tick mark, is going to be 1,000 meters or 1 kilometer. So yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. Also handy for getting distances real fast, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. So I have written down just 3 random points, and I'm going to demonstrate how to plot those points. It's pretty straightforward, and an easy way to remember plotting points is right, up, right, up. That's essentially all you need to do for plotting points. So I'll demonstrate that. So our first point here is 88, 64, 86, 52, or 88, 64, 86, 52. Usually there's not going to be a space in between here, so you'll have to just kind of decipher these out. And now an 8-digit grid coordinate is the most common. But what I will say about grid coordinates is the amount or the number of numbers that you are given is going to correlate exactly how accurate this point is. So an 8-digit grid is the most common, and as long as you plot properly, an 8-digit grid should get you within 10 meters of that point. Meaning that when you plot your point, as long as you do it properly and you shoot your azimuth and you do all that properly, you should be within exactly 10 meters of your point. Now, if you bump this up to a 10-digit grid code, that's going to get you within 100 meters of your point. Now, if you have a 6-digit grid code, that's going to get you within 100 meters. And then if you have a 4-digit grid code, that's going to get you within 1,000 meters, and you kind of get the gist. Obviously you can't have a 0-digit grid code because you'd have no idea where to go. And also, a 2-digit grid code would be insane. So would a 4. So you're most commonly going to see a 8-digit grid code though, which again should get you within 10 meters of where you're trying to go, or of your point. So to start, we have our first point here. So I have broken this up into 2 sections, but again, like I said, usually these will not be broken up, so the easiest way to do it is when you get your point, just underline the first 4 and then underline the second 4, and that just kind of allows you to visualize that kind of break in between them. So what you're going to do when you're reading this is these 2 numbers to start on the first set here and on the second set are going to correlate to your northings and your eastings. So 88 is going to correlate to our northing. So 88 is going to be the number that we are going to find on the top or on the bottom of our map. And now our second number, our second set, is going to correlate to our easting. So that is going to correlate to the number we need to find on either the right or the left of our map. So this first point here is going to be 86. So that means we need to look at the 88 line and the 86 line. And now what we're going to do is essentially you're going to use your finger or whatever, and you're going to find where those two grid lines intersect, which is going to be right here. And now what you're going to do is you're going to take your triangle, make sure you're using the proper one, and you're going to line that up exactly on that that corner right there. And now it's going to look a little funky because this is where we intersect, but you're always going to want to know that you are right and up. And the reason that I say right up is because you're going to want to remember that when you find your intersection point, the grid square that you're going to be looking at is the one to the right of it and up. So we're looking at this grid square here, which should be where our point is plotted. And now I am looking at this map, and I think the grid lines are a little bit off on this map. Again, this isn't a very good map. This is just one that I printed offline. So but it'll work for today's purposes. So essentially you're going to take your triangle and you're going to take the very corner of it and you're going to place that where those two lines intersect. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go right first, or well, yeah, so you go right up, which is going to get our where they intersect, which is our first set of right up, and then you're going to do your second set right up, which is going to be the next two set of numbers here. So we have 64 and 52. So we're going to go 64, and now an easy way to think about this is this actually is 6.4 and 5.2. That's just how I like to think about it. So when you move this, you're going to take your protractor, you're going to move it to the right, and you're going to find the number 6, that dash line, and then you're going to move it 0.4. So this is going to be the line just before our halfway mark in between 6 and 7. So that's just how I kind of like to think about it, is 6.4 or 5.2. And now I know it's probably pretty hard to see these tick marks here. I'm just moving a little closer because of how worn down this is. But on your protractor, the largest triangle here is going to have your each number individually, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, all the way up to 10. And then in between those numbers, there's going to be little tiny dash marks, which corresponds to it would be 10 meters or 0.1. And then your smaller grid square is going to still have 0 through 10, but then it's only going to have a singular dash mark in between, which is going to correspond to 50 meters. So you have to do a little bit of guessing there. And then your smaller triangle is 0 to 10 also, but instead of it being like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 instead. So again, a little bit more guessing that you have to do with that triangle as well. But so now that we have moved 6.4, we're going to now do our up portion, which is going to be 5.2. You are not going to move the protractor for this. All you're going to do is you're going to take your pencil, and what I will note is get in the habit of using a pencil on your maps. Do not use a pen, because if for whatever reason you need to erase your point, you can't erase a pen. So use a pencil. It's a good habit. Now 5.2. So we're going to go up. We're going to find our 5, and then we see 1 tick mark, 2 tick marks. So that right there, apologies, is 5.2. And now what I like to do is I like to put the pencil on that spot. I kind of messed it up a little bit, and then I twist it around. And the reason that I do that is because it is going to make the mark as small as possible, unless you do like me and you accidentally slip, which should
give us, the smallest amount of error possible. So that is our first point. And what I like to do also is I like to circle it and then I label it as P1, which just reminds me that that is point 1. Now we'll go through our next two here, but I'll do it a little bit quicker. But I'll just kind of talk through it as I do it. So we have 87, 85. So we find 85 and 87, which intersects here. And then we put our triangle there, and then we have 1.4. So 1 to the 4th dash mark there, 1.4. And then we move up 4.2, which is going to be right about there. Again, twisting that around, and then we just circle it and we write 0.2. Okay, that's 0.2. Now one more time, 0.3, 88, 87. So we have 87 up here, 88 intersects here for a triangle directly on that corner. And we have 3.2, 3.2, and 9.6, 9.6. And like I said, this map is a little off, so we're right on that grid line. But there you go. That is 0.3. So those are our 3 points. Yeah, usually you'd have a starting point or you'd have a known location and you'd have the grid coordinate for that as well. And that's how you would determine which direction you're going to head when you start. But that is the gist of plotting points. Hopefully you don't have points this far apart. These are pretty spread out, but it's doable. But yeah, nothing too complicated. Just you got to remember right up, and that's an easy and simple way to remember that. But yeah, now that we have plotted our points, next I'm going to show you how to do distance. All right, now we're going to do distance, and distance is pretty straightforward. If you have a small enough distance, you can use your protractor to determine it, but we're going to be using a piece of paper. This is just a regular piece of notebook paper, but anything will work as long as it's able to cover the distance between your points. And now, what you would do if you have a small enough distance where you can use your protractor is you would put your protractor on the corner where 0, 0 is, and then let's say your point is like here, then you'd know that is 700 meters because there's a 7 there, and like I said earlier, each one of these corresponds to 100 meters. So this would be 700 meters, but our points are much further apart, so we have to do this slightly different. So let's say we want to determine our distance between point 1 and point 2. What we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of paper, and what's nice about notebook paper is it's kind of already got some lines on it. So what I like to do is I like to take and I'll line one of these lines up, still make sure to mark it, but essentially you're going to mark the point there, and then you're going to mark this point here. And I'm just doing, this is a straight distance, but we'll talk about curved distances here in a moment. So again, you're just going to line those two dots up with the edge of your piece of paper, and then you're going to mark them with your pencil. And now, as you can see, we have two small marks here for our distance. And now we're going to take this and we're going to bring it down here to the to this little bar down here. And we're going to take our first tick mark and we're going to line it up with the very end. And now what we're going to do is this ends slightly before the 2 kilometer marks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark 1 kilometer on the paper here, and we'll mark that as 1 kilometer. So now we're going to take it and we're going to take our last tick mark here. We're going to line that tick mark up on the 1. And now that we have it lined up on the 1, we can count these smaller hash marks here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we know that this second one is 1.9 kilometers, or 1,900 meters. And that is our distance from point 1 to point 2. That is our straight shot distance, which is very, very, very far. Now, again, I'll do it again, but instead this time I'll do it from point 1 to point 3. So again, we're going to take our edge of the paper, preferably a new edge, and we're going to line up point 1 and point 3, and then we're going to make 2 dash marks, one on this point, one on this point, and we're going to take it down here to the bottom of our map, line that up with the left edge, mark where 1 kilometer is because it doesn't go for 2, label that, and then shift it to the left here, and then we can count our boxes, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So know that this is 1.5 kilometers, or 1,500 meters. Boom, there you have it. So what I usually like to do once I have my distances is I'll write from point 1 to point 2 is 1,900 meters, and then from point 1 to point 3 is 1,500 meters. And now, depending on which route you want to take, you could always find the distance from point 2 to point 3, or vice versa. You can kind of do it in any order, and that's going to depend on what your plan is exactly for getting to each one of these points or locations, and that is all up to personal preference. So based off of where we did these points, whether you're going to want to go from point 1 to 3 to 2 and then back to your start point, or you want to go to 1, 2, 3, or you want to, let's say your start point's closer to point 2 and you want to go 0.2, 1, 3, it's up to you. Whatever makes the most sense, and whatever you think is going to be easiest. But yeah, so that is how you do a straight line distance. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate a curved line distance. I'm not going to use any of the points here specifically, but what I am going to use is one of these trail systems here. And let's use, I'm trying to find a good one here. This could be a good spot here. All right, so let's say we have a point at the very top of this mountain here, and we say that we're going to start where this trail branches off. So we're walking, and we want to know the distance from where this Y in the trail is to the top of this mountain. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to take the edge of our paper. And now you are going to line the paper up with the start of the trail, or where you plan on starting. And you're going to take the edge and line it up with the trail as straight as possible. So this first section, you're going to mark the starting spot. This first section is right there. Excuse me. And now what you're going to do is you're going to move the paper without trying to keep it in the same spot until the trail is lined up straight again. And then you're going to mark the next spot where that kind of ends and the trail is no longer even with the paper. And then you're going to move it again until the paper is straight. And then you have this here. And then it's just kind of repeating the same process over and over, making sure to maintain where your last tick mark was without moving the paper as much as possible. Sometimes rotating the map is easier. Of course, you're going to move a little bit, which is okay, to be expected, because nobody here is perfect. But you're just going to keep going around the trail, making sure to line up where it is straight as much as possible and to the best of your ability, to get the most accuracy. Sometimes it can be a little difficult, but it's not too bad. And now we're just about done here. We have here, and then should have just about one more to our point. There. And now we have our full distance of that trail. So this is the start here, that mark, and then the last mark all the way to the right here is our last one. So oh sorry, not this one. There's one here. All right, so this tick mark all the way to the left is our start, and this tick mark all the way to the right is the end. And now we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to line it up, our one all the way to the left on these smaller tick marks here, or all the way to the left of our bar down here. And then we're going to mark where 1 kilometer is, because this is slightly over 1, which is going to be right here. So this is 1 kilometer, and then we're going to shift it to the left. And this does not line up exactly, but we can kind of estimate that this is like 1.075 or 1,075 meters. So that is how you would do a curved line distance. So that tells us our distance from the Y in this trail to this point up here. And that is how you do a curved line distance. Because if I was to just do a straight line distance from here to the point up here, we're going to get a shorter distance than what the trail actually is. And then when we're out there doing our pace count, it's not going to be accurate. We're going to be short. And we'll talk about pace counts in the second part of this guide series. But yeah, that is how you do distances. Those are the two forms that you will use. You can use your protractor if it's a short enough distance, or you can use a piece of paper, which is what I prefer to do. But yeah, now that you know distances and plotting points, we're going to talk about azimuths. All right. Now we're going to talk about azimuths. And to determine an azimuth, you're going to need your protractor, and you're going to need a piece of paper. And now you're going to want to make sure that your piece of paper is larger than your protractor, and you'll see why here in a second. And now when you're doing azimuths, your protractor is going to have this little kind of X in the middle, and that is what we're going to be using for determining our azimuths. And when I say azimuth, I'm talking about our angle to whatever direction we're trying to head in. So let's say we want to determine our azimuth from point 1 to point 2. What we're going to do is we're going to do essentially what we did earlier with the distance, where we line up point 1 and point 2 with the edge of our paper. And actually I'm going to do this from the other side here. I'll line this up with the edge of our paper, just like so. And now you're going to take that X and you're going to line it up with your point 1. And now you're going to want to make sure that, you know, to the best of your ability, this line going here is straight up and down. And now essentially what we can do is we can look at where the paper meets the degrees marks here. Now these numbers on the outside you're going to ignore because these are mils, and you will not be using these. These are used usually by mortar teams and stuff like that in the military. But what we're going to be looking at is these numbers on the inside, which correlate to degrees, which is what we will be using on the compass. So as we can see here, our paper intersects with, here's 230, this is 231, 232. It's a little bit in between, but we're going to say 232. So we know that from point 1 to point 2 is 232 degrees. So we're going to write that down so we don't forget. 2 degrees. Now, like I talked about earlier, what we must remember is that this is our grid north. So this is not going to be the same as what is on our compass. Now, what we need to do to convert to our magnetic north, or what we will be looking at on our compass, is we need to subtract 13.2 degrees. And usually what I'll do is I'll just round to the nearest whole number. So we're going to say this is 13. So 232 minus 13 equals 219 degrees. If you need a calculator, you can use a calculator. But this is 219 degrees. Let me just double check this to make sure I did my math right. Yes, 219 degrees. Okay. That is the degrees that we will be looking at on our compass. So now we know from point 1 to point 2 is 219 degrees, and it is 1,900 meters. Now, from point 1 to point 3, we're just going to do the same exact thing. But we're going to go like this. Make sure your map here is straight up and down, so north should be away from you when you're doing this. And let me just grab the protractor here. Okay. Now, we're going to do the same exact thing. Line up our points with the edge of paper here, and then put that little X on point 1. And now we can see that this is, there's 345, 346, 347 degrees. So we have 347 degrees. And now we're going to subtract our 13.2 degrees, which is going to equal roughly 334 degrees. And that is what we're going to look at on our compass. I believe I did my math right there. I'm doing this all in my head here. But yeah, so what's important is to remember that you need to convert to your magnetic north, because if you just use your grid north azimuth or degrees, you are going to be off. Because if you shoot, we'll say 347 degrees to point 3, and you didn't subtract, you're actually going to end up like over here probably, instead of on point 3. So that is essentially how you get your azimuths. It's nothing more complicated than that. Sometimes what people will actually like to do is they'll put a little hole here directly in the center, and they'll attach a small piece of string or like dental floss, and what you can actually do is take that piece of string and you can move it around, which just kind of makes it a little bit quicker than at a piece of paper. But that is how you get your azimuths, which is important for when you're out there trying to find your point. And again, you can find from point 2 to point 3, or point 3 to point 2. But yeah, that is how you find an azimuth. And now, I kind of touched on it, but why do we need these two pieces of information exactly? Well, one, we need our distance, because we need to know how far we're going to be traveling. And again, like I mentioned in part 2 of this guide series, we will talk about pace count, and how we can keep track of how far we have actually walked or gone. So yes, so our distance is important for knowing how far we're traveling, and then our degrees is important to know which direction we're traveling in, because without this we will have no way of knowing which way we're supposed to go. So this degrees, we're going to take our compass, and again we'll talk about this in the second part of this video series, but you'll take your compass and you're just going to turn your body until you line up with this degrees. So once you line up with 219 degrees, you know that your point should be directly ahead at 1900 meters, which is a extremely long movement and would be very difficult. But for the purpose of me demonstrating this, that's what we're going with for today. So yes, so that is how you get your distance. That's how to do a curved distance. That's how you get your azimuths, and that is how you plot points. That is kind of the basics of being able to go out and find your point. One thing I will mention though is that when you plot your points, always double check them. What we like to say is plot twice, walk once, which is a very true saying, because making sure that you have actually plotted these properly could save you a lot of time instead of having to take your map out and replot a whole point in the middle of your movement. But now I have two last things that I would like to cover in part 1 of this guide series, and that is going to be a intersection and a resection. So without further ado, let's get into those. Alright, so the last topic we're going to cover in part 1 of this guide series is intersections and resections. Now, these are going to be a little bit difficult to demonstrate without, having prior knowledge, or not prior knowledge, but having kind of other people, because resections, when you use not a resection, when you use an intersection, is usually when you're working with a team or like team members, and one of your team members is lost. And now, essentially, what you do with an intersection is you'll radio to them, or your means of communication, and they're going to tell you two known points on the map that they can see. So for this demonstration, we're going to say that we are talking about this mountaintop here. We'll say they can see this mountaintop here, and they can see this symbol over here. We'll say this is a building, even though I'm pretty sure this is like an outdoor restroom. But yeah, for the purpose of this, we're going to say that this is a building, and this is the largest mountaintop here. Or we'll say maybe there's like a cell tower on top of this mountain here. And those are two known points that they can see. So what they are going to do is they're going to radio to you, or they're going to call you, and they're going to be like, all right, I see these two locations, and here is my degrees. And let's say they shoot an azimuth to this building here, and we'll say they shoot like 301 degrees. And now we have to remember that this is magnetic north, not grid north. And then they shoot to this one, and we'll say they shoot like 200 and we'll say 43 degrees. Again, magnetic north. What we are going to do is we're going to take these magnetic norths, and we're going to do the opposite of what we did when we found our azimuths. We are going to instead take 301, and we're going to add 13.2, which is going to give us 314 degrees. And that is our grid north. We'll do the same for 243, add 13.2, which is going to get us 256 degrees, grid north. Okay, now that we have our degrees, what we would do, and the reason I say this will be a little bit difficult is because I don't actually know, obviously, the exact degrees to these two locations on the map, because I'm not out there and nobody is standing there telling me the actual direction to those points. So we're going to kind of do this theoretically, and I'm not actually going to do the proper angle, even though I will show it and it most likely won't line up. But what you're going to do is you're going to take your protractor, and you're going to put that little X, like we had talked about, on that known location. And you're going to take your piece of paper, and actually I'm forgetting a step here. What we need to do is we need to get a back azimuth first. That's why I was being hesitant there for a second. I was a little confused. All right, so we need to get a back azimuth. And now a back azimuth is also good to know for your own, your own points too, because a back azimuth is directly behind you. So you will be able to, if you walk a distance and you're like, all right, I can't find something, let me shoot my back azimuth and walk back to where I was, then you can walk directly back to the location that you were just in. So what we need to do is we have 314 and we have 256. To get our back azimuth, we need to first determine whether the degrees we have is greater than 180 degrees or less than 180 degrees. And that is because if we are greater than 180 degrees, we're going to subtract 180. Also, I wrote 5 here. We're going to subtract 180 degrees. So with our case, we'll subtract 180, and we'll determine the answer to that, and we'll also subtract 180 for this. Now let's say we had, like, I don't know, we'll say we had 15 degrees. Instead of subtracting, what we need to do to get our back azimuth is we need to add 180 degrees, which is just going to equal 195. And that would be our back azimuth. Now for these, let me just whip out the calculator because I don't feel like doing this in my head exactly. We have 314, and we're going to subtract 180, which is 134 degrees. Now, this is still our grid north because we have already converted it. And we'll just do the same with 256 minus 180, which is our back azimuth of 76 degrees. Now, those are our back azimuths. And, apologies. What we can now do is we take our piece of paper and we line it up with that known point that they gave us. So first we're going to do this building here, and we're going to say, okay, they told us that that building is 134 degrees from their current location. So we're going to go 134, which is there. Just making sure that we are still lined up here with our known location, making sure this line here is straight up and down as possible, and there is 134. And now what we're going to do very gently is remove our protractor. It's easier to do this if you have like a thicker piece of paper, but you're going to the best of your ability, try and draw a straight line as best as possible and as far as possible with the piece of paper you have. And now we have this line here. And now we do the same for our next known location. So the top of this mountain here. And now we'll say that our team members here told us that that is 76 degrees from their current location. So we're going to take this and we're going to go to 76, which is right here. And this is actually going to work out just perfectly. And then we're going to draw our straight line again. And we want to make sure that these two lines that we draw overlap each other. And that is because the location where these two lines overlap, which is right here, is the location of our team members. So that is a very helpful piece of information and a very cool actually piece of information and skill to know, because by knowing those locations of they shoot their azimuth and they tell us the exact angle of where those 2 points are from them, then we can draw these two straight lines, and where those lines intersect is the location of our team members. So this X right here that is formed is our team members. So that is a helpful way of finding somebody if they are lost, and you have communications with them. Then you can do your intersection and you can find out where they are on the map. And now we have our resection. And a resection is essentially the same thing, but it's going to be for ourself instead. So let's say we're out there and we're lost, right? And let's say we'll use this building again, but instead we're going to say we can see this area here instead this time. So this little tent symbol, we'll also say it's a building. And now, like, okay, we can see these 2 points, even though realistically you probably would not be able to see those 2 spots on this map. For this demonstration, we're going to say that we can. Okay, now what we are going to do while we are out there is we're going to take our compass and we're going to do the same thing that our teammates would have done. We're going to shoot an azimuth to those 2 spots. And we're going to say that, I don't know, we'll say that it's like 185 degrees, let's say, to this building here is 185, and to this one here we'll say is like, I don't know, we'll say it's 95, I guess 95 degrees. And now again we need to convert, this is our magnetic north, so we need to add our 13.2 to get to our grid north. Oops, 13.2, which is going to get us 198, and this is going to be 98. This is going to be 108. Okay. Now that is our azimuth that we have shot to that location, and now we need to do the same step. We need to get our back azimuth. So now we're going to take this number, and now we look at these, and we can determine that this first azimuth here is greater than 180, so we are going to subtract 180, and now this is less than 180, so we're going to add 180. And again, I'm going to take out the calculator, and we have 198 minus 180 is going to equal 18 degrees. And now we have 108, and we're going to add 180, which is 288 degrees. And now we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to take our piece of paper, we're going to take our protractor, and we are going to determine this building, and we're going to say, okay, this building is I'm trying to remember which one I did first. 18 degrees. Yes, this is the one that we determined was 18 degrees. Okay, so we're going to say this is 18 degrees. Again, I don't actually know if this is going to work because I'm not actually out there right now shooting an azimuth. So we have 18 degrees, just like that. And now again, we are just going to draw our straight line to the best of our ability with the edge of our paper here, just like that. And now we're going to do the exact same thing for this point here. And we determined that this one was 288 degrees. So we're going to line it up here, and this lines nicely up with a grid point, actually, or grid line, sorry. And we have 288, 280, 90, 88. Let me get the paper there. This is 288. Boom. Just like that. Make some small adjustments here. Okay, 288. And now we're going to draw our straight line again. Just like that. And now we look where these two lines intersect, which is right here. And right where they intersect is, guess what? Us. That is you, my friend. That is where you are on the map. And now you are no longer lost. You know where you are, and you can find where you need to go to get back to civilization or wherever it is you're trying to go. So that is a resection. So we have our intersection and we have our resection. And that concludes everything in part 1 of this guide series of our basic land navigation. So again, we covered our map itself and kind of what everything means. We talked about plotting points. We talked about distances, straight line distances and curved line distances. We talked about azimuths. We talked about what else we talked about? Distances, azimuths, and we talked about intersections and resections. And we also talked about how to convert from our magnetic north to our grid north, and how to convert from grid north to magnetic north. And that is everything that you need to know to set yourself up to go out there and do the thing, to actually do the land nav. So in part 2 of this video series, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be demonstrating pace count and how to use a compass and everything you need to do actually out there, boots on ground, moving through the woods to get to your point.
All right, thank you for watching today's video. I hope that this was some very helpful information to you. Land navigation is kind of one of those essential and basic skills that is something that everybody should know, especially when trying to become prepared, because GPSs aren't always going to work, our cell phones aren't always going to work, so we need to know these basic skills for when those pieces of equipment go down or for whatever reason are not working. Because if we don't know this skill and our cell phones doesn't work, or it's dead or whatever, we're just going to be playing up lost. So land navigation is extremely important. I hope that you found this video very helpful. And again, this is part one of a two-part series that I'm creating of a basic land navigation guide, where I'm going very in depth with all of kind of the basics for land navigation. Let me know of some future content maybe you want to see in the future. Let me know if you enjoy this. And without further ado, I will see you in the next one.